Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm going to talk about a project that's been in development at USC in our lab for almost 5 years. I just have time to do a quick overview, but ideally, you guys can go to Union Station and actually try it. So this project started in collaboration with the Huntington Museum, the Institute on California and the West at USC, LA Metro, and the Chinese Historical Society of Southern California. The idea was to tell the story of the original Chinatown that was located, right here. This is a map from 1930, and this is Union Station, the major train station in Los Angeles. When the station was built, this whole community was completely demolished, and the community moved to another location. That community had been there since 1880. In 1934, they were given notice that they had to move. The wrecking crews moved in, and within a year, everything was completely gone. The new station was constructed here. You can see all the train yards. Luckily, when that demolition started, a photographer was hired to go around and photograph every facade in the original community. So this is a collection of 128 photos that the Huntington Museum has. So since everything's gone, this is really pretty much the only record we have of the community that was there, at least the architectural community. So there's a close-up of one of the images. So I'm just showing this as a kind of intro to give you a sense of the materials that we're working with. There are other archival materials. There are artifacts that were dug up when the station was built that are in various collections that we've used as well. But anyway, the main thing we first started doing for this project was to think about how, instead of having those artifacts and images just sitting in the museums or in the archives, we wanted to actually make them available to the public while they were at Union Station. A lot of people don't know this story. Metro especially, to their credit, was interested in having people know what happened when that station was built. So we decided to do this as a kind of AR experience. And one of the first steps in that was to actually take those 128 photos and start to geo-locate them on the old maps. The photographer had written the addresses on the back of the photos, and we used other archival materials to figure out exactly where they were. So here you see, the start. Again, there's 128, so we started just placing these along the two main streets, Marchesalt and Appa Plaza here. So the main play mechanic that we wanted to use in this was something called rephotography. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's something that's been used mostly, well, again, in archival photography and museum research. So these are photos of the same spot taken about 100 years apart. And the photographer went back and found exactly the same location where the photographer stood, knew the same focal length, and tried to replicate it as closely as possible. So there's another one. You can barely see this butte over here. So we wanted to figure out how to use that in a kind of AR mode. We did some early tests in 2019 using, I think, ARKit at this point to just make sure that we could take the historic images and embed them, make them, sit there in space fairly stably, and with your mobile phone be able to sort of walk up to it. So that was That was pretty successful, but we wanted to figure out then what could you actually do with those photos. I mean, just seeing the photo spatially located, I mean, that was good. It gives you a sense of, well, this is what used to be here, but we wanted to go a little bit further. And at the time, about a year later, 2020, we didn't have a lot of choices. We were thinking about using Snap, but unfortunately the file size limitations wouldn't work for the kind of resolution we needed. We really like the idea of WebXR because then you're only downloading in a browser. You don't have to download this huge app. But that wasn't far enough along at the time. So we had been working with Niantic. We were early access developers for Lightship. So we started developing a prototype using that. And this is a quick video of a first proof of concept of how this, we imagined this could work. So in this case, a tablet, we're using Lightship's VPS features. So you have to scan a physical object, this sundial, right in front of Union Station. And once you do that, it embeds all the assets that we built. So there's one of the historic images of a restaurant that was literally right there, as close as we can calculate. The kind of ghost facade you see behind it is a model of the whole row of buildings that was at that location. If you touch the historic image, that opens up into a portal where you can look into a 3D model of the community that we built from those original photographs. So again, this is a prototype of the kind of play mechanic we wanted to have here. So there's a couple others along here that she can look at. Luckily, the walkways lined up with the original streets, so we didn't want our viewers, obviously, to walk out in the street and get run over. So there's another image into the streetscape. Okay, well, that's enough. Let me keep going on. So the way we did that, again, to achieve this notion of a portal looking into a 3D space, we took the images from the original 128 photos, started stitching them together, and then ended up building geometry that was extruded from the original insurance maps that showed where the old buildings were, like Sanborn insurance maps, if you're familiar with those. And then we just texture mapped these photos, the stitched images, on top of the geometry. And those were placed behind the virtual portals. Here's kind of a fly-through of the whole model. I mean, it looks pretty simple here. I mean, it is pretty simple. And this is about 2021, 22. We've gone on to actually build out the facades, so add on 3D features to make it a little bit more dimensional. And that was built with Blender, actually a lot of different tools, Rhino to some extent. And let's see. So for the proof of concept, we did some user testing. You know, we asked people if this worked. You know, did this give you a sense of the community? And so a couple important issues that we got back from our user testers. One was, well, if I have to download this, I'm probably not going to do it. You know, already, even with the proof of concept, it's a pretty heavy file, and it takes a long time. These people are in a train station. They have a few minutes. They got to catch a train. They're not going to sit there and play with this or download it and play with it. So first thing was we wanted to then shift. Luckily, right around that time, Niantic bought Eighth Wall. started incorporating all the VPS features and some others, like some of the play state and other things that we wanted to use. So we shifted from a Unity-based pipeline to the Java-based, JavaScript-based pipeline that 8th Wall required using A-Frame. And I'll show you an example of that in a minute. The other feedback we got was, and this was especially from some of the families who had actually lived in the original Chinatown. They're like, well, okay, this is cool, but it looks like a ghost town. There's no people in there. So we had to go back and think about, well, how do we populate these environments and make this much more vibrant? I mean, the community was incredibly vibrant and resilient based on what they went through. So, it's just an example of the kinds of ceremonies that were going on in that community. So in our database and our work with our other collaborators who are experts in kind of the who lived there, what everyday life was like there, we were able to get information about some of the leaders of the community, some of the kind of key people that included Anna May Wong, who was a famous Chinese actress in early Hollywood, Tyrus Wong, who was one of the animators for Disney on Bambi, and anyway, a lot of really interesting people. David Lee and Peter Suhu were the ones we chose to use for our next prototype. And we wanted to do that in a way that they would actually appear in 3D and start telling you stories about what it was like to live in that community. So I had seen an installation by a Japanese artist named Masaki Fujihata, a longtime friend of mine who did an amazing work at the Japanese American National Museum here in Los Angeles a few years ago to embed these volumetric figures around the museum in downtown LA. So Masaki came on as a kind of advisor for our project and helped us figure out a workflow, an updated workflow to generate these 3D characters. So we worked with MetaStage, again, here in LA, to bring in actors that we costumed in 1930s wardrobe. We scripted a very short dialogue for them. We could only afford to shoot about a minute of each character. It's a very expensive process. And we got back, some great but very large files of these, which for WebXR is also a challenge. To be able to download these characters at that file size is just not going to happen. We're sort of back to the original, download an app kind of thing. So luckily, there's another company that we work with named Arcturus, who helped us. They have a system, a product called Holostream that allows us to further compress the files and then download these characters on demand. So we don't have to sort of download everything and keep it on your phone to be able to do that. So I'll show you an example of these in a second. Okay, and then last of all, before we get to the demo, we wanted to also make this a kind of fun and playful experience. Obviously, there's a lot of history and kind of educational material here, but we wanted to kind of embed it in a way that would make it kind of fun. To participate in a kind of research project. So we came up with this idea of the Temporary Memory Anomaly Research Institute that's inviting you to come kind of help find information about this community that used to be there and that has sort of popped up now and then in these energy disturbances. So that's for short, of course, Tamari, and that's the Tamari bot that leads you through the experience, kind of gives you cues and clues about what to do next, things like that. Okay, so here's a quick video of our most current version. This is a prototype that was funded over the past year by the National Endowment for the Humanities. The program is Digital Works for the Public. So they were intrigued with our proposal to actually take the archives outside and make them publicly available in this AR format. Okay, so here's where we are.
So this is Union Station. In October 1935, the first 30-day notice was served to vacate Chinatown. It was right here.
So we're still keeping the portal feature, looking into a new version of that model that we've used now a number of Gen AI tools to colorize and fix the textures on that model. Here's another one of the characters, David Lee.
It's completely changed. 6 years I've been gone and I could barely recognize it all.
Peacock Alley was in the middle of Appablasa. I called it Peacock Alley because there were peacocks. There were peacocks even before grandmother brought the two given to her by the Dohenis. Chinatown was about 2 square blocks. Grandmother lived off of Appablasa, which ended in the stables with the Chinese playground, Maya. We used to sit in the playground and throw stones at the horses.
Ah, greetings, dear traveler. It is not often that I am awakened from my slumber. What brings you to this forgotten corner of memory? Old Chinatown, as you now know it, was established in the late 19th century and thrived until the early 20th century. It was a bustling community filled with the sights, sounds, and flavors of Chinese culture. However, it was unfortunately demolished in the late 1930s to make way for the construction of Union Station. Those were sad times for us.
Okay, again, that's a prototype with NEH funding. We've now applied for a third phase to try to make a kind of bulletproof version of this for public release. And just to finish up, those last 2 scenes you saw, I should probably explain. So the memory scene might have looked a little dreamlike, and that's because it was all Gen AI generated. So we used Midjourney, ChatGPT, tried some other things with Pika and Runway. But the idea is to use some of the historical archives, like this oral history from Dorothy Home, who lived in the original Chinatown. We trained the system on that. We used historic images to generate a kind of memory, a virtual memory of what it was like to live in that space. And I think you also heard some 11 labs processing to recreate her voice in that. And then the second piece, the Peacock, was using the Inworld module in 8th Wall, which is a way to make a character that you can interact with. And again, in this case, the Peacock was trained on this oral history and some other texts that we have about original Chinatown. So you can pretty much ask it anything about Chinatown and spend a fair amount of time kind of conversing with it. So that's where we are now. The exhibit is still up It's a temporary exhibit. It'll be up until October at Union Station. If you want to try this soft launch, eventually, again, we hope to have a final version with many more portals, many more of those virtual characters, and these memory beings, as we call them. Here's some of the team who made this possible. A lot of our advisors who were constantly involved in this. Bill Deverell, my co-PI on this project. This is our main team, many of who are here today, if you have questions for them. And I gotta say, most of these are undergrads who built this thing out. Quite an incredible effort to do this. If you wanna try the experience, again, you should go to Union Station, but if you wanna try just the characters, you can do it through this QR code. And you'll get to that landing page and you just hit on, click on Peter Suhu or David Lee. So that's it, and I'll just leave with a plug for our other installation, another project that's down in the XR Museum. Anyway, that's it. Any questions? Quickly.
With the time.
Yes.
How was it received in terms of Los Angeles, some historical? Is it possible that this could be something that goes throughout? It ends up being more of like Red Card, all these things that Los Angeles has torn down. Is it well received?
I think for us, the most amazing thing that happened was that Metro invited a lot of the families to come try this and see the exhibit. They were so happy to have this story told. And I think, from our user testing, I mentioned a little bit, again, there's some problems. People still don't quite know what to do with AR. They don't know how to navigate through the space, so we had to do a lot of hand-holding. And I think we'll hopefully fix that in the final version of this. But I think in general, yes, it's been very well received. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, unfortunately we are out of time. We have to move to the next session, yeah. But
Okay.
I'm sure you're welcome to talk.
Okay,
Thank you very much, Scott.